I canceled my wedding at the last minute after learning my fiancé lied about a child-free rule just to exclude my 15-year-old daughter while inviting her own kids. So here's the deal. I'm a guy in my 40s, and recently I had to call off my wedding last minute. Why, you ask? Well, my fiancé, who's also 40, had been keeping this big secret from me, which concerned my 15-year-old daughter. We'd been a couple for 4 years and were engaged for 7 months. I really thought I knew her inside and out, 100%. But turns out I was way off base. She'd been keeping me in the dark about something major that affected my daughter's role in our wedding, which honestly threw me for a loop. The whole saga kicked off when we got down to sorting out the wedding guest list a few months back. She put her foot down about wanting a totally kid-free wedding, no one under 18 allowed, period. That struck me as odd right off the bat, since she's got 3 kiddos of her own from a previous marriage, aged 8, 10, and 13. On top of that, she's always hanging out with her nieces and nephews, ages 4 to 16, during family get-togethers, birthdays, and holidays. I was puzzled, so I asked her why, and she said she wanted us to have this adult-only vibe on our big day. Her reasoning? Kids would be too distracting and noisy during the ceremony and reception. She had been to a few weddings recently where kids were apparently running the show in a not-so-good way. We're talking crying, loud talking, and running around. She wanted our day to be all about us, no kid chaos included. Plus, she thought all the adults would have a better time dancing and dining without needing to play babysitter. I didn't take this decision lightly, though. My daughter and I are super tight, and the idea of her missing out on such a big day was tough for me. We've been through so much together ever since her mom and I split up when she was just 3. She's always been my little cheerleader, even when dating got complicated or past relationships didn't work out. Her mom's remarried to a great guy who's been an amazing stepdad, so she's pretty cool with the whole remarriage thing. My daughter has been nothing but understanding about the whole blended family situation. She's reassured me over and over that she wants to see me happy and was genuinely excited about the idea of getting a stepmom and step-siblings. So after a lot of back and forth and debating this whole child-free scenario, I eventually gave in, but only because my daughter told me she'd be okay with it. She joked about trading the wedding for ice cream and a special father-daughter dinner the next weekend. She seemed to get that some folks just want fancy, kid-free weddings and didn't want to make waves between me and my fiancé. She even was cool with crashing at her mom's place that weekend and said she could catch the ceremony on video if we decided to have it filmed. Plus, she pitched the idea of a little family dinner post-wedding where she could get dressed up, and we could take some family pics. I thought the whole no-kids rule was going to apply across the board, her kids, her nieces, and nephews included, so I assumed it was fair. Even though it stung a bit to have my daughter sidelined, I made peace with it. But then, just a few days ago, I stumbled upon something that flipped everything upside down. I mixed up our laptops and ended up taking hers to work. While on my lunch break, I noticed her Facebook was still logged in, and bam! There was a message from her sister about her daughter's dress for the wedding, and what time the kids should arrive for pictures before the ceremony. I couldn't believe what I was seeing, so I took a screenshot on my phone as evidence. Later, when I checked again, the message had vanished, probably deleted by my fiancé to cover her tracks. But the damage was done, and I was left piecing everything together for the rest of the day. That night, I turned to my daughter and asked if something had been off between her and my fiancé. She told me that ever since our engagement party, my fiancé had done a complete 180. She'd be all nice when I was around, but cold and dismissive whenever I wasn't. My daughter had tried to chat with her about school and friends, but it was like talking to a wall. So my daughter was telling me about how she tried chatting with my fiancé about her hobbies and typical teenager stuff. But either she'd get really brief answers, or my fiancé would just kind of ignore her and walk away. It turns out that before we got engaged, my fiancé used to actually ask my daughter about her classes and extracurriculars. But after the engagement party, all that interest just faded away. My daughter mentioned that my fiancé even started making remarks about the amount of time and effort I dedicated to her, like driving her to activities, helping with homework, or planning special outings. She suggested that my daughter should be hanging out more with kids her own age, or spending more time with her mom instead. Interestingly, my daughter kept all this to herself because she saw how happy I was with my fiancé. She didn't want to mess that up since it was the first time I had really been happy after a tough breakup. She hoped things might get better after the wedding, once we were living together as a family and had more chances to bond. My daughter has always been super mature and considerate, and she didn't want to create any drama or force me to choose between her and my fiancé. She assumed my fiancé's coldness might just be wedding stress that would pass once the big day was over. On the morning of our wedding, when I showed up at the reception area about 3 hours early, I found my fiancé's kids and her nieces and nephews already there. They were all dressed up in formal outfits, taking pictures with the photographer, running around, and having a great time setting up decorations. Clearly, they had been there for some rehearsals or planning sessions I knew nothing about. Their clothes matched the wedding colors, and the girls had their hair professionally styled, showing that this wasn't a last-minute addition. I was really upset and went straight to my fiancée. I showed her a screenshot of a Facebook message I'd found the day before. Her reaction was telling. She looked shocked and started making excuses about the kids being there. She claimed her sister convinced her at the last minute that family should be there and that she was going to surprise me. I pointed out that this was clearly planned for weeks, not just decided the night before, since the kids had outfits and assigned seats with their names. I told her I couldn't marry someone who would lie to me about something that affected my daughter, especially when it seemed like she treated her own kids differently. So I decided to end our relationship right there and walked away from the venue. I left without explaining to the guests why, but I just couldn't pretend everything was fine after being lied to and seeing my daughter left out of such an important day. After leaving, I spent the rest of the day dealing with phone calls from family and friends asking what happened and making it clear that the wedding was off for good. Some people might think I acted too harshly by leaving like that, but I had to stand by my daughter. Some folks have even questioned if my daughter was being truthful about how my fiancé treated her, but I know she wouldn't lie about something this serious. My daughter's mom and I were never married, and she's happily remarried now. My daughter's always been open to me finding someone special, encouraging even, because she wants me to be happy. She knows how much I value honesty, and she's never tried to come between me and my relationships. So here's the scoop. I called off my wedding a few days ago and figured it was time to fill you all in on the chaos that followed after uncovering my ex-fiancé's lies. Right after I left the wedding venue on Saturday morning, I headed home. When she got back, I told her she had to pack up and move out that same day. I mean, how could I keep living with someone who lied about something so crucial to our relationship and future as a blended family? She'd been living with me for about a year and a half, so her stuff was all over the place. I had to let her know that she couldn't stay because of what she did. Now, I know it's tough to find a new place on short notice, especially after she'd already given up her own apartment to move in with me. So, I gave her a couple of days to sort things out and crash at her sister's or parents' place. They both live nearby and have extra space where she could hang out temporarily while figuring out her next move. She was super upset, crying and begging me to rethink my decision, saying we could work through this and that she'd do whatever it takes to fix our relationship and regain my trust. But honestly, lying about my daughters here was a deal breaker for me. I told her she needed to leave ASAP so I could get started on healing any damage caused to the relationship with my kid. Eventually, she called her sister to make arrangements and spent the rest of Saturday and a good chunk of Sunday gathering her essentials, like clothes, important documents, and work stuff. My friends have been amazing through all this. They totally get why I had to put my daughter first, and have been super supportive of my decision to maintain our home as a place where she feels safe and comfortable. They even said they're proud of me for handling such a tough situation. Some of them had noticed things felt off during our engagement. My ex would get annoyed or impatient when my daughter was around, and she always tried to hog my attention at family gatherings and parties. My friends were planning to talk to me about their concerns, but didn't want to meddle unless I asked or things escalated. They'd observed that my ex often suggested adult-only activities and conveniently scheduled important talks during times I was supposed to be with my daughter. I also blocked my ex's parents and sisters on my phone and social media. I felt they were in on the whole deceptive plan about the wedding guest list, because they included all their kids but left out my daughter. I thought we had a solid relationship over the past 4 years, and was really looking forward to having them in my and my daughter's lives. I laid down the law with my ex, telling her she could either text me an explanation for her actions or just let it go without any more contact. I wasn't up for face-to-face chats, was too angry and hurt for that. I needed to focus on my daughter and moving on. Strangely, she didn't reply immediately, which is odd, given her job requires her to be glued to her phone all day. Fast forward a few more days. It's been nearly a week since calling off the wedding, and finally, she texted back. She wants to meet in person to explain herself, claiming text messages can't capture the full story or emotional complexity of what she was dealing with during our engagement. She insists I owe it to our 4-year relationship to hear her out face to face, but I stood my ground, reiterating that she needed to send everything over text. I wasn't about to get caught up in tears or emotional pleas in person. I needed to digest her words without pressure. I gave her 24 hours to send me the whole spiel, or I'd block her and close the chapter for good. I have to look after myself and my daughter, free from further emotional games or lies. This was her one shot to be upfront and honest. The whole situation with my ex-fiancée really took a wild turn, and I never saw it coming. She finally got back to me the day after I confronted her about why she'd been treating my daughter so badly, and sent me this lengthy explanation. I swear, her reasons were so out there, I couldn't have guessed them in a million years. Apparently, it all went back to our engagement party. A few months before the wedding, we had this big shindig to celebrate our upcoming marriage. My daughter wasn't feeling her best that evening and headed to her room early after making her rounds and saying hello to everyone who came to celebrate with us. My ex went upstairs to check if my daughter needed anything, like water or medicine. But instead of finding her sick, she caught her chatting and giggling on the phone with a friend. To my ex, this was some kind of red flag. She jumped to the conclusion that my daughter wasn't sick at all, but was just pretending to get my attention and derail our engagement party. Rather than just talk to me or my daughter about her concerns, my ex took off with her suspicions to her sisters. They all got in a huddle and cooked up a story that my daughter was some kind of master manipulator trying to mess with our relationship because she wasn't happy about me getting remarried. According to them, teenagers are always out to sabotage their parents' new relationships. They spun tales about other blended families where the kids had supposedly caused all kinds of trouble, and they convinced her to set firm boundaries with my daughter before we tied the knot. The advice was pretty extreme. They told her my daughter just wanted me to herself again and was planning to make our marriage difficult. Because of this one phone call, my ex spent the whole 7 months of our engagement being cold and distant with my daughter. She decided that the best move was to make my daughter feel unwelcome in our soon-to-be family, hoping she'd spend more time at her mom's place. She thought this would make our life quieter and smoother without the hassle of blending families. It gets worse. My ex admitted she had planned the child-free wedding to send a not-so-subtle message to my daughter about her place in our family. She wanted her own kids and nieces and nephews to be front and center, to show that there were different rules and priorities in our family, hers above mine. This was her way of laying down the law that her kids came first in everything. I talked all this over with my daughter, who was just as confused as I was. She admitted to being on the phone that night, but clarified that she really was feeling under the weather, with a nasty headache and tummy issues thanks to something she ate. Chatting with her friend was actually making her feel a bit better. She was genuinely excited for the party and wanted to be there, but her body was telling her to take it easy. My daughter couldn't wrap her head around why being on the phone while sick was seen as deceitful or attention-seeking. She assured me she had always been supportive of my happiness and never tried to put a wedge between me and my partners. This whole ordeal was a wake-up call that my ex never really accepted my daughter as a part of our family and was intending to slowly phase her out to keep my attention on herself and her kids. The child-free wedding was just the start of what would have been years of exclusion for my daughter from family events. I'm grateful I figured all this out before the wedding, sparing my daughter from more exclusion and saving our relationship. Fast forward a bit, I canceled the wedding, and it's been 8 days since then. A couple of days after my last update, my ex unexpectedly showed up at my doorstep wanting to pick up more of her stuff from the house. She had texted earlier, asking if she could come by for some of her furniture and kitchen essentials she couldn't fit in her car during her first move-out. I told her we needed to schedule a time when I wouldn't be home, maybe during my work hours when my daughter was still at school. This way, it'd be less awkward for everyone and avoid any uncomfortable run-ins or emotional conversations. I even offered to have a friend over to ensure everything went smoothly and without drama. But instead of waiting for me to respond with available times or agreeing to my suggestion about having someone there, So, out of the blue, my ex-fiancée shows up at my place one evening around 7 with her sister and her sister's husband tagging along. They were there to help her move some of her big stuff, like this dresser and bookshelf she had brought over from her last apartment. I open the door, and she immediately starts saying sorry, wanting to talk about how things went south between us. Meanwhile, her sister and brother-in-law are just hanging back, looking super awkward and not making eye contact. She fessed up that she didn't handle things well with my daughter, acting immature and all, and that she had listened to her sister a bit too much about how to manage the whole step-parent situation. Apparently, she had a big blow-up with her sisters, realizing their advice messed up what we had. Living at her sister's place got tense because they kept arguing about what went wrong, and who's to blame for things falling apart between us. Her sisters now claim they were just trying to help her deal with a tricky situation. They didn't mean for things to get so messed up, or for it to wreck our relationship. They're pointing fingers at her for not getting their advice right and taking it too far. Meanwhile, she's mad at them for encouraging her to treat my daughter poorly and thinking excluding her from the wedding was a good idea. She was begging for another shot, promising she'd make it work with both me and my daughter if I let her come back and repair the mess. She said she finally got that my daughter is the most important person in my life, and even offered to do family counseling or therapy to figure out how to be a better stepmom and partner. She promised a sincere apology to my daughter and assured that she would never exclude her from family things again. She wanted to rebuild the trust and fix things during our engagement that got broken. I told her straight up that my daughter comes first, and I had to do what's right for her, meaning I can't let someone back in who tried to push her away without a valid reason. Trust isn't something that can be pieced back together easily when it's shattered, and I couldn't risk my daughter facing more emotional turmoil. Her past lies and treatment of my daughter showed a lack of character that I needed in a partner, and I couldn't trust her to treat my daughter well, no matter what she promised. I explained that my daughter's emotional security is my top priority, and I can't gamble on her happiness or comfort at home. I asked my ex-fiancée to quickly grab the rest of her stuff and went upstairs to avoid her tears and attempts to change my decision about ending our relationship for good. She and her family took about an hour to load her things into their truck, and I could hear her crying the entire time, but I stayed put until they left the driveway, ensuring they were gone. Luckily, my daughter was at her mom's that night, so she didn't have to witness any of the drama or feel like she was caught in the middle. I gave her a call later, letting her know that my ex had picked up her things and this chapter was completely closed, so we could just focus on moving forward and getting back to our normal lives together. The silver lining in all this is that my bond with my daughter is back to how it used to be before the engagement. She's being open and sharing everything about her life again, like school stuff and summer plans, without holding back. She seems much more at ease without my ex around, and she's even inviting friends over again, something she stopped doing because she worried about how my ex would react to the noise and chaos. We're planning a little getaway with some friends and their kids, which sounds perfect after these exhausting weeks. My daughter is pumped about us having our home back to its usual peaceful vibe without the tension that was around during the engagement. While it sucks, I spent 4 years with someone who wasn't on the same page with me about important stuff like family and honesty. I'm glad I figured it out before we tied the knot and before more damage was done to my daughter's sense of belonging in our family.